Hi, good day. I'm Peter Jordan from Steve Properties in George, and today I have a special guest, Louis Scalbert from the DVH Group. Louis, some interesting times and new developments, and there's a lot of new documentation that goes with listings nowadays. And one of those documents is the property condition report. Now, I know that you are an expert on those kind of scenarios, as you as an attorney normally receive all the complaints and all the hiccups around property conditions. So Louis, give me some feedback around the condition report.
Peter, thank you so much. I like the fact that you say I'm an expert. I wish I was. But we deal a lot with real estate agents and their OTPs when it comes to the property condition report. And normally what I do is I like to tell a story, and I'm going to just quickly tell a story what happened recently. So end of last year I got a phone call from a principal and he was in an absolute state, and he said, Louis, you have to come to my office immediately because there's huge problems on a certain file. So I cancelled all my appointments. I drove all the way to the principal, and what I saw there was a letter of demand for the sum total of 300,000 Rand. So apparently what transpired is that there was a transfer that went through 2 years ago already. Now you can just imagine, 2 years has lapsed, and all of a sudden this principal receives a letter of demand of 300,000 Rand. So I went through the file, and what I picked up is that the seller got in an expert, a structural engineer, for roof inspections, and what they found there is that there were some structural issues with the roof, and they're holding the real estate company accountable for that 300,000 Rand. So here goes, Section 67 of the PPA, the Property Practitioners Act. They got nailed on Section 67 of the Property Practitioners Act. Number 1, it says that when you at mandate stage or listing stage, I think you mentioned that, at listing stage you should get a signed property condition report from the seller, which in this case didn't happen. The property condition report was only received on a later stage in the transaction. Number 2, the property condition report, the mandatory disclosure form, was only sent via email to the buyer and never signed by the buyer. Now the Act is quite clear. It says that all relevant parties must co-sign the mandatory disclosure form, which in this case didn't happen. And number 3, and I mean this I see on a regular basis, is what this agency did. They used a different type of property condition report and not the prescribed property condition report as prescribed by the PPRA. And based on those facts, they're holding the state agency accountable and liable for the repairs of the roof. The Act also says in Regulations 36, I think, refers to that if it's not signed by all relevant parties, and this is quite interesting, the property is sold as if there were no defects. Now you can just imagine, they're only holding the estate agents accountable for the structural damages. So I went to the principal and I advised him, listen, I think it would be in your best interest to settle this thing on an amicable way. And he said, no, he's not going to do that. He's going to fight this. And I think about 3 weeks ago, he received a summons of not 300,000 Rand, but of 600,000 Rand, based on the fact, in terms of that Section 67, that if it's not signed by all the parties, they can hold them liable for all the defects. So what this seller actually did is, he went and did a full inspection of all the defects and issued summons against this real estate company. So my advice to all real estate agents and real estate professionals is, at mandate stage, in other words at listing stage, you must make it quite clear to your sellers that, listen Mr. Seller, in terms of Section 67, it's law for me to get a mandatory disclosure signed form from you. Otherwise, I can't take a mandate from you and I can't sell your property, because it puts yourself at risk, it puts the real estate company at risk. So follow the law. So I know it's not always possible. And I think in your business, if it's an open mandate and you're the 10th agent now approaching the seller, Mr. Seller, give me a mandate, give me a property condition, signed property condition report. It's not always easy to get that from the seller. I don't know how you guys how you treat that scenario.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's very important, because what we see in the past is that, say for instance, it is an open listing, as you mentioned, and there might be 4 or 5 agencies on that listing. Not all agents is equal in terms of education.
For sure.
So one agent would come up there and they will tell the seller that, no, it's just extra work, we're only going to do it afterwards, or we're not going to do it now. You save, your property looks in a good order. And then we as a company come in and say, in terms of law, we need to do it. And that confuses the public. And I understand, everybody is taking the path of least resistance and to do less paperwork. But the consequences of agents not following the correct procedure and the wrong advice can have serious effects at a later stage.
Like in this instance.
Yeah, even to the seller and the
For sure.
agent. Because sometimes you get it that the seller would say, I'm not going to sign the condition report, but you as an agent needs to prove that you actually asked for that, because otherwise the liability is going to come onto the agent. But in my opinion, it is always good practice for anybody who's selling a property to fill in a condition report and discuss everything that is applicable, because at the end of the day it's going to come back to you, and if, like you said, they might see it that the property is without any defects, and we all know, even a newly built property sometimes, although it doesn't need a condition report but the NHBRC certificate and all that kind of stuff, but even on that there's always some defects, and the reality is we need to take that into consideration and advise the public as well as the agents on what to do. Now, in our instances, for us it is good practice taking the mandate, signing the condition report, we file it on our system, but once we have an OTP, together with the OTP, the buyer also signs that condition report.
That's you doing it strictly according to Section 67.
That's what we have to do.
Regulations. Well done.
And before we do that, before it goes to the seller, we make sure that condition report is signed. And I think that is an important thing around, and it is not always just about the law, but it's also looking after the interest of the buyer as well as the seller.
Absolutely.
And we've got a responsibility in this industry and this public domain to look after all the parties' interest.
No, I like your practice, and I like the SEEF way. You're doing it correctly, absolutely following the law as well. And like you said, Peter, it's all about protecting the interest of both the seller and the buyers. What I found in the industry is that when it comes to the filling in of the mandatory disclosure form, agents tend to rush it too quickly. Yeah. And just to get it signed, and they don't explain the full extent and meaning and implications of what does foot stewards actually mean, especially when it comes to patent or latent defects. And I know when it's a seller, when I've sold one of my properties, I think my property is the best and it hasn't got any defects, although there's a lot of defects. And I think that it is a duty from the estate agent side to explain to your buyer what is an actual latent defect. Do you know of any? Are you aware of any latent defects? Are you aware of any patent defects? And disclose everything. I also say, I try and teach real estate agents, it's safer or better to over disclose than under disclose.
Absolutely.
And also, it's much easier to deal with any defects prior to transfer. Like in this instance, they came back after 2 years of registration. So deal with all the defects, deal with all the latent and patent defects, put it on the table, get it signed, and in that regard, you will be safe in terms of the law, in terms of Section 67.
No, absolutely, and in some other cases that we've seen as well is, you know, we might have an investor that is owning a property, but he hasn't stayed there for 10 or 20 years. That is common practice. And you know, but the tenant will normally tell us, you know, about all the faults that there is, but it is not the responsibility of an agent to fill in the condition report on hearsay or whatever
I agree.
Other people say. So our advice normally would be, and you can tell me if it is correct, that if somebody didn't stay in the property, they don't know about the defects and it wasn't disclosed to them, they actually just write onto the condition report, I haven't stayed there for 10 years or whatever the case might be, and I'm not aware of any defects.
That you've touched a point that is so true, and I've seen agents actually, and I can tell you horror stories of agents that on behalf of the seller, because of the fact that the seller has not been living in the property, and on behalf of the seller, they're doing the inspection. And I mean, a patent defect for you as a real estate agent is not a patent defect for the seller, or whatever the case might be. So you're 100% correct in saying that. So what you said is, seller hasn't been living in the property, therefore cannot comment on the condition of the property. I also add a little bit extra and say the purchaser is aware of the implications of the fact that the seller cannot disclose, which obviously means, and it actually in the regulations, if I'm not mistaken, it refers to, I think it's section 67(3) or 5, I'm not too sure. It refers to, nothing stops you, Mr. Buyer, to get an inspector doing a full inspection of the property, knowingly that might be better for you if the seller cannot properly disclose. And also another thing that I like to add in what you've mentioned is that that you indemnify, and we spoke about it earlier, that you always indemnify yourself as the real estate professional as well as the seller against any claims because of the fact that the seller cannot disclose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we need to understand is that an agent can't be a jack of all trades. You know, they're not professionals when it comes to defects in a roof or plumbing problems or whatever the case might be. But you know, from experience, we've seen certain stuff that was not disclosed, and then it becomes the problem of an agent. And for us, it is very important to have a good relationship with a buyer, with a seller, with all the parties, so that everybody feels that it is a good transaction and it's a win-win for everybody. But normally, you know, it is when we start hiding things or do it differently than what the law prescribes, that is when the problems comes up, and so on. So yeah, I think that is great. One other thing is, even in terms of rentals, we do the same. You know,
yes,
we have
absolutely correct.
We've got a condition report there stating the condition of a property. But one thing that came to mind, say for instance, we list a property and where the market is slow, and that property is on the market for say, maybe a year or two. But we filled in the condition report the day when they actually signed the mandate.
In other words, the old one.
Yeah, the old one now, 2 years expire. And you know, as we all know, no maintenance was done, and there was some, do we need to update that condition
That's
report?
a very valid point you're raising there, Peter. Yeah, for sure. I always recommend real estate professionals that you must go back to your seller and say, listen, here's the property condition report of a year and a half old. Has anything changed since you've completed this form? Oh yes, now that you mentioned that, I got a leak in my swimming pool, or the creepy crawly is not working now, or the air conditioning system is not working functionally properly, so we need to amend. You're absolutely right. It's a valid point that, so guys, when your property condition report, I would say, is older than 3 months, not even 3 months, you always go back. Has anything changed since you've signed that property condition report? So well done. Just before I forget, I see another tendency in the industry, and I know Steve does not take part in that tendency, is where there's multiple agents that listed the property, and you won't believe me. And this happens quite often. It recently happened in Kleinmond, where there was a property listed, and I think it was open to various agents, 15, 20 agents, and they used the first agent that did the listing, the first listing that completed the property condition report, and they shared that property condition report amongst all the other estate agents.
Yeah, like photos.
Photos and so just to be aware of that. So actually what happened, it's not a funny story, but where they used this property condition report that stated that the building plans is not approved and up to date, okay? And another agent, they used another agency's OTP, which stated that approved building plans will be supplied.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so that's why I urge any sellers out there, please, you know, you got to give each and every agent the opportunity to fill in their own property condition report. Don't share it, and don't use other estate agencies' property condition report.
Don't shift your responsibility.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Louis, thank you very much. I think it was very informative, and yeah, and to you out there, I trust that this will assist you in your dealings and your buyings, I would really recommend DVH Group as an attorney, and if you need any information, make contact with Louis. Like he said, he's always available 24/7. But yeah, I respect that as well. Sometimes after 12 we need to sleep and rest as well. But Louis, thank you very much, and we'll chat again.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much for the opportunity as well. And like Peter said, for me, it's prevention is better than cure. Rather phone us, phone Peter, and we will help you if you don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.